So, price elasticity of demand is really just a measure of how responsive quantity demanded of a good or service is to a change in price of that good or service. So let me write that down. So it's a measure of how responsive quantity demanded is to a change in price of that good or service. And this triangle is just, for the uninitiated, it's just the Greek letter delta, which we use to represent change. Use it to save space and time. So anyway, this is all well and good. It gives us a starting point for understanding what price elasticity of demand is. And really, like I said, all it is, it just tells us how sensitive the amount that consumers are willing and able to buy of a particular good is to a change in its price. So again, that's great, but economists use a little bit more nuanced and sophisticated way to express price elasticity of demand, and really the way to think about it is this, and it is the percentage change in quantity demanded caused by a 1% change in price of that good or service. And so I think that's a good segue to my next point, which is the formula. How do we calculate price elasticity of demand? You have a good idea of what it is. How do we calculate it? I calculate it like this. I will warn you that the formula looks a little bit unwieldy, but it's really not once we work with it and get acquainted with it. So up top, we're really just going to be looking at percentage change in quantity demanded, which we'll denote like this. However, this is if you recall, percentage change formula is just new minus old over old. This is a slightly, should be 2 right here. This is a slightly modified percentage change formula in that it's not new minus old over old. It's new minus old over new plus old, if you will. And I'll explain sort of the significance of that in a second once I finish writing down the formula. Of course, below is just going to be, it's going to concentrate on the percentage change in price. And then we would see the same thing down here. It should be a plus sign. Really, this is slightly different than the standard percentage change formula because we're looking at arc elasticity, is how economists refer to this. We can't use just the standard formula because depending on whether we're going from a price increase or a price decrease, the base will, again, depending on where we're coming from, will give us different value for the price elasticity of demand. So it's not a reliable indicator of price elasticity of demand. So economists have found a way around that, and you're looking at the way around it right here. So I thought, now that we've got kind of an understanding of what price elasticity of demand is and a formula with which to calculate it, I thought let's look at an example and we can work through it and get our feet wet with it. So I was at Costco the other day, and they have all these nice HD TVs when you walk right in. So let's look at some HD TVs and calculate their price elasticity of demand. Let's say that the original price, we'll just write that using P1, was $1,000. And then the new price, they dropped the price, let's say they dropped it to $900, as retailers are wont to do with consumer electronics. Let's say you did a bit of digging and you found out that the original quantity demanded at $1,000 was, they sold 500,000 units, 500,000 HD TVs. Let's say, now that they dropped the price, more people can afford them, more people are willing to buy them, obviously, in holding with the law of demand. And now they're sold 750,000. Well, we have everything we need to calculate the price elasticity of demand of these HD TVs, so let's go ahead and do it. And to save a little bit of time and space, since heck, both of them are scarce resources, I thought it would be a good idea if we just kind of simplify some of the arithmetic and not do every single one of the steps. So up top, we are going to have, let's just write this, price elasticity of demand. So up top, we're going to have 250K. Just write that to save some time and space. Should be a 0, and that should be a K. And then below that, we will have 1,250,000, so we'll add them together. And then below, we're going to have, we're just going to have negative 100, right? Remember, the new price is the lower one, since they dropped the price in this instance. And then below, we're going to have 1900. Luckily, this is fairly straightforward. This is just going to be 1/5 0.2, and then this is going to be negative. Remember, don't forget the negative sign there. Negative 1/19. And that is actually going to be, I did some of these calculations off screen, that is going to be, let's see, 0.0526. 0.052, sorry, my pen is taking the weekend off, unfortunately. 0.0526. And so that is going to be, actually that's going to be negative 0.0526, I almost forgot the negative there. I'll explain the significance of the negative in a second. So that's going to be negative 3.802. Okay, so we've calculated the price elasticity or demand of these HGTVs. However, we're not quite done yet. One caveat, one thing to watch out for is anytime you calculate the price elasticity or demand, you will always initially get a negative value. And so, having said that, you always need to take the absolute value of it. So, of course, in this case, absolute value of it is going to be 3.802. The reason why you always get a negative is because of the law of demand. You're always going to have a negative up top or below, up top or below, and the reason why is because in keeping with the law of demand, anytime you see a price increase, you see a subsequent drop in quantity demanded of that good or service. Anytime you see a price decrease of a good or service, you're going to see a subsequent increase in quantity demanded of it. And so basically, like I said, you're either going to have a negative up here or down here. And of course, that means you're going to have a negative in your final value here. And we can't have that for reasons I'll explain shortly. So we take the absolute value of it, and we get, in this case, 3.802. Alright, so what does that mean, though? We've got our, we've done all our work as far as calculations go. What does that mean, though? Glad you asked. There's three classifications of elasticity or demand, price elasticity or demand. And the first is anytime elasticity or demand, price elasticity or demand is greater than 1, as it is here, that means that the good is elastic. That just means that it's responsive to change in price. The quantity demanded of that good or service is responsive to a change in price. So in keeping with sort of the original sort of definition that we laid out earlier is, one way to think about it is anytime you see a elastic good, the percentage change in quantity demanded of that good is going to be greater than a 1%, is going to be greater than 1% if you have a 1% change in its price. So it's just sort of, if you think of an elastic rubber band, it's just sort of very responsive to any, the quantity demanded of an elastic good is very responsive to a change in price of it. Of course, the opposite scenario is, you have inelastic good, and that just means, anytime you have price elasticity or demand is less than 1, that's inelastic, and of course that's just the opposite scenario. Sometimes you have price elasticity or demand is equal to 1 exactly, and that's unit elastic, and that just means that sorry, my pen here is taking the weekend off. That just means that the quantity demanded of a good or service changes in lockstep with the change in price of that good or service. So that's basically it. To wrap up, though, I will say there's 3 determinants of price elasticity or demand. Some folks want to know, why are some goods elastic, why are some inelastic? long and short of it is substitutes, income, and time. And unfortunately I don't have a lot of time to explain these given the time constraint, but the more substitutes you have, the more elastic the good will be. More options consumers will have to switch if the price goes up or the price changes. More consumers' income increases, the less elastic, the more inelastic the good will be, and the more time that has elapsed since a price change in a good or service, the more elastic the good will be, because the more time people will have to adjust their consumption habits. So that's it on price elasticity of demand.